Some of the debris they dug from the ground contained some worms. These worms were 42,000 years old, and they were still alive. Get ready, because today we are going over 10 horrifying underground discoveries. When you dig the ground, there are many things you can see, but while many are normal, some are unusual. And yet, some are very scary. We will show you 10 horrifying underground discoveries made by people digging the ground. Be sure to stay to the end of the video, because we always save the best for last. Get ready for 10 horrifying underground discoveries. Number 10. 1,000-year-old corpse found while digging a pond. It won't be news if you dig the ground and find some bones, but it may be scary. That was how Ali Ertuk felt. The 15-year-old was digging the ground and made a pond for his father when he saw some bones. He wasn't surprised first because he thought they were animal bones, but on further digging, he discovered a skull. This time he was sure it was a human skull. Maybe it was strange, but that was still not strange enough. When he called the authorities, they examined the skeleton found, but they realized nobody would be charged for murder. The skeleton had been lying there for 1,000 years. Scientists confirmed that the bones were those of American Indians who died 1,000 years ago. What he found wasn't just a burial ground, but an archaeological site. Number 9. 1,700 skeletons of Scottish soldiers discovered in a university campus. If you think finding a 1,000-year-old skeleton underground was horrible, then what will you say about a 17th century mass grave? Workers from Durham University were digging on a site on the campus to extend the school's library. But what they discovered was more than they could have ever imagined right there in their school campus. Were 2 mass graves. They found human skeletal remains in large numbers. The more they had dug, the more skeletons they were finding. In total, about 1,700 skeletons were found. They were buried in the 17th century. It wasn't clear immediately who they were, but today scientists believe they were Scottish soldiers that were captured in the Battle of Dunbar. The battle took place during the Civil War around 1650. Number 8. Pompeii, a city buried underground. 1,700 soldiers were a lot to be found underground. But what about a whole city? Yes, a whole city, including people, buildings, and properties. That was the case of Pompeii, a Roman city that was buried in ashes. The city experienced a great volcanic disaster, and hot lava poured on the entire city, burying them. But as horrible as it was, archaeologists believe it preserved culture and knowledge of the ancient world. Because the ashes prevented air and moisture from getting to the buried city, therefore it perfectly preserved them. Today we can dig up and see the ruins of an event that took place in 79 AD and understand how people lived then. But I am sure you wouldn't want to visit the site. It is pretty darn horrific. Number 7. Cinema found underground. French police were on a training exercise when they discovered a cinema hidden underground. Yeah, a functioning cinema. This was not a ruin of ancient times or as a result of a volcano eruption. Modern-day humans, with all our modern-day technology, dug up the ground and built in a cinema, fully equipped with a great screen, projectors, and chairs. Wait, did I say cinema? It was more than a cinema. It was a multifunctional center. Right there under the ground were a viewing center, a dining room, and a bar fully stocked with drinks. Also in the underground building were saloons. The building had electricity, a camera that recorded every movement, and 3 telephone lines. Well, it was the police that discovered it. If not, it would have been terrifying, because before you get to the main building, there was an instruction that read, "Building site, no access." Despite the warning, the police went further and suddenly started hearing dogs barking. Relax. They weren't real dogs. It was a recording of a dog barking. The police left the site and returned 3 days later, but when they got there, the electricity cables had been cut off, and there was a note that read, do not search for us. I don't know about you, but that certainly is terrifying for me. Number 6. Dig down for a Ferrari. Finding a car shouldn't be scary, except if you find it deeply buried under the ground. In February 1978, some young boys were digging in the ground in Los Angeles. And then, one of them hit something they first took for a medal. Of course it was metal, but when they dug deeper, what they saw was not just a metal bar or sheet. It was a Dyno 246 GTS Ferrari. Yes, a sports car found buried underground. They immediately called a police officer who arranged for how the buried treasure was unearthed. To everyone's surprise, the car was still in good condition. 2 years previously, the car had been declared missing by the owner, and his insurance company had already paid for it, so the car was handed over to the insurance company. But I can imagine finding a Ferrari buried deep underground is a tad strange. What do you think? Number 5. 42,000-year-old worms found alive? When you're digging permafrost, you should expect to see unusual things, but the Russian scientist was still baffled with their discovery. The scientists were digging the frozen part of the earth to see what nature had preserved for us. Well, they saw it, but it was more than what they were bargaining for. Some of the debris they dug from the ground contained some worms. These worms were 42,000 years old, and they were still alive. I repeat, these worms had been under the ground for 42,000 years, and they were still alive. That means they came to the world around 40,000 BC, and they're still alive to this day. Being frozen for 42,000 years is not a joke, but I'm sure many people may wish to have the worms' experience. Getting frozen now and coming back to life in the future? Gosh, imagine how our world will look like then. Number 4. Whale found under railway line? There was to be a railway construction to connect Charlotte and Burlington in 1849. As the work was in progress, construction workers suddenly discovered some tiny bones underground. That shouldn't be strange. It could be the remains of any animal. But as they dug deeper, it started to become interesting. Many bones, but no legs, no hands. It didn't take long for them to realize what they found was a gigantic aquatic animal. But the nearest ocean was 250 miles away. The animal measured 20 feet in length, and the scientific observation confirmed that it was a whale that died sometime 11,000 years ago. That was during the Ice Age. After the Ice Age, the shallow water dried up and became today's railway construction site. Number 3. The Mystery Ball. There are many metallic balls buried underground, so finding one shouldn't be a big discovery. But that was not the case with the Betts family. The couple was examining their farm after a fire incident when they saw a solid metallic sphere buried in their farmland. They dug it up and examined it. There was nothing unusual about it other than they weren't sure what exactly it was, and that it had an elongated triangular mark on it. They decided to keep it and therefore brought it to their home. But you know what? 2 weeks after the ball got in their home, it started misbehaving. You heard me right. The ball started misbehaving. It started doing its things. Firstly, it started making noise, started producing sound and vibrating at a regular frequency. Also, when you roll it on the floor, it won't obey you. It would just go in any direction it preferred and return to its starting point. The family was surprised and informed the press. Among the journalists that saw the sphere testified and said, "Mrs. Betts told me to put it on the floor and push. It rolled away and stopped." "So what?" she said. "Just wait a minute." It turned by itself and rolled to the right about 4 feet. It stopped, then it turned again and rolled to the left about 8 feet, made a big arc and came back right to my feet. That was 1974. And up till today, nobody knows for sure what the ball is. Maybe a device from aliens. Or what do you think? Number 2. Baby sewer. It happened in Israel when a group of people were excavating an ancient underground sewer. What else would they be expecting from a sewer other than feces from other ancestors? But surprisingly, they saw some tiny bones. They had to increase their efforts and discovered more bones. First it was hundreds, and then it turned to thousands. They initially thought they were the remains of the chickens eaten by the people of the Roman Empire, but they were shocked when they started taking out human skulls. It didn't take them long before realizing that they had discovered a sewer dedicated to disposing of newborn babies. You surely wouldn't want to be a part of this excavation team, would you? Number 1. Headless skeleton and a pile of skulls. Workers were sent to Dorset for the expansion of the road, but as they were digging, they discovered a horrifying thing that was more important than the project. Under the ground were skeletons of some 54 men. 54 headless bodies were found at one side, while 51 heads were at another side. It is reasonable to believe that the heads belonged to the bodies, while 3 heads were missing. Evidence showed that these men were beheaded with their hands tied. These skeletons were proved to belong to some Scandinavian men who were executed around 1000 AD. Scientists believe they were Jomsvikings. This terror group lived in England around the time of the excavation. That's it. Please like our video and subscribe for our channel for more.